You have very prolific poetry life. You have published 3 books of poetry, The Flood with Tia Chucha, Abductions with Read Large Press, and also the last one, The Yellow House with CCM, the Civil Coping Mechanism. I would like to start with you reading a section from the book Abductions.
She is standing by the dresser I found in the hallway, thrown away by another tenant that lost his job and had to move. Naked, the bruise on her left arm from our last fight is exposed about an inch below her shoulder. The fight that left my right index finger with torn ligaments and the nightshirt she's owned since 12 ripped to pieces on the floor. That night of tequila and trying not to talk about my leg that keeps breaking, trying not to talk about our fractured marriage, trying not to talk about our baby gone. All that's not spoken of coming out in screams and punches and spit, the dog hiding under the desk.
The poem has the ability to take the reader into a very private, very personal space. You have a quote in the opening of the book, The Yellow House, where you say, "I choose poetry over honesty."
Right.
And I want to know, how do you manage this dialogue between what to expose and what not to expose?
You know, it's interesting talking about that specific poem with that question, because before the book went into print, my wife actually was worried for me for that poem. She was like, "Do you want people to read that?" And she wasn't worried about her, even though in that sequence she's the one that's hurt. And for me, that's in that specific piece and in that book, because it's so much about loss, that I thought, if I don't expose this other part of my experience, which is becoming this violent person, then I wouldn't be able to trust the pieces. Like, I can't talk about my victimhood, my loss, if I don't share this part also. So I think for that, it was really getting down to not facts, but what's the truth of what happened. The truth of what happened is there was this moment of violence. Whether it's completely accurate or not factually, it didn't matter, because I needed to say this other thing.
And I also connect that segment in that poem to something that I read in an interview that you said, "I started to write to turn my life into evidence."
Yeah. It's a strange thing when at some point in your life, through learning, through all those stuff, you realize, oh wow, that first time you realize, oh wow, everybody experiences something differently, the same events differently. Then you really have to go, okay, what was it that I experienced? What was it that I saw? And so when I started writing it, it was like, okay, this is how I saw the world, right? This is how I saw my life and the experiences in it. And that's always been crucial. And I think that comes from like immigration too, because like moving from country to country, you just start feeling super invisible. So it's like, how do I not disappear completely?
This is a very abstract question, but I want to ask you, what has been the role of poetry in your life?
It's actually not very abstract. Going back to the immigration thing, like, I left Korea before I started school. So it felt like I was just trying to grasp speaking Korean and about to enter a world where I would be making friends and all this thing. And then we went to Paraguay, and then I had to start that routine again. And so I was just starting to get a grasp of Spanish and having friends and things, and it was like, now we're moving to another country with a different language again. So by the time I got here, I just didn't want to speak anymore. It was like, I don't want to do it.
It's too much effort.
Too much effort and too isolating, and I always felt like an outsider. Because you're like, I have to learn this to become an insider, so it's like obvious you're an outsider. So until I discovered poetry, I didn't think I would ever be able to express my life. And so the poetry became this thing of, wow, I have all these things inside me that I want to say now. And what it did, I was telling this young girl like a few months ago at an event, for me, writing poetry became this thing of like, in a weird way, like digging a tunnel, where at some point all these different tunnels that people were building would converge and cross paths. And it gave me access to people. It gave me access to love and experience and sharing and community that I never imagined I would have. So it's pretty like I think I modeled my entire life and lifestyle around poetry at this point. So I don't even know what it would be without it. Yeah.
I had a friend that lost her mother when she was 13, and she stopped speaking. She couldn't talk. But she was an actress, so she was able to speak only when she was in character. Trying to connect the role of poetry in your life, there is a poem also in Abductions that I think illuminates your answer.
This poem is called The Hour, and this is the end part of it. I tell her this is why I write, to keep all of us alive on white sheets of paper, in combinations of abstract shapes with harsh angles, even those who have been taken from us one time long ago and once more, to keep us not breathing but permanent.
Also from one of your interviews you say, and if poetry is about getting into the reader and to the world, then doesn't that defeat the purpose to write poetry and put it in a book that nobody will read? So you have done many things that are not exactly books, in this expanding the meaning of publishing. You have done events in transit places or unexpected places. And I want you to talk about two specific projects, Ghostmaker in 2015 and also the project 90 by 90.
The first time we did in 2014, it was just actually just a challenge where we've been thinking a lot about partnering with local businesses to let them know that having arts in their business is actually beneficial to them. So that's how 90 for 90 started. Yeah, so we ended up doing it at a bar in Union Station, like the whole thing. We didn't really think beyond that. I mean, we had some thoughts on like, hey, we need to make, since it's our thing, let's have more writers of color doing stuff in like, more than usual events. This year, our approach was more intentional. Like it was a combination of things. We wanted to highlight two neighborhoods that we thought were going through a lot of gentrification and displacement, which is South Central LA and Little Tokyo. The second thing, the Ghostmaker in 2015, is both, that was a personal project. It was both the most out there thing I've done, and also I really think of it as my biggest failure because there are a lot of things I didn't consider. And it was one of those things, it's a one-shot deal. You can't do that again.
Could you explain it a little?
Ghostmaker was, through the course of the year, from January to December, every other month I was going to read new pages from a book I was working on called Ghostmaker. At the event, I would read the new pages and then destroy it. Digital files, physical files, so there's nothing left. And then the thinking was the people attending it would write stuff about their experience, what they're thinking, all their feelings. And sort of we were gonna gather that after each reading and turn that into the book called Ghostmaker, where it would almost be like a negative space of the book that I just destroyed. I was overwhelmed with things because I was sort of working on it on my own, and I couldn't just flip my brain from like reading this drawing to then handling all this writing from other people. And also, I didn't consider the emotional impact it would have on me.
Interesting.
So like half a year later after it was done, like the following summer, I was still reeling from it. It was a great experiment, but I feel like I always think when I think about it, I have this sadness like that was failed project. So
Could you describe quickly what 90 by 90 is?
90 different literary, cultural events, readings, discussions, and activities over 90 consecutive days.
In different venues?
Yeah, in different venues around
different
LA.
cities even?
Yeah. That's something we wanted to try out this year, whether we could. I mean, it's 2017, we have like technology and things. So why not try connecting with other cities? Yeah, I mean, it's been what we hoped it would be. So that's what success is. Like, we don't think about attendance or anything. We don't care if 2 people show up or 100 people show up. Yeah, and the fact that we've now done 60 events and I think close to 90% of the presenters have been people of color, then it really makes me think if you have a reading series in LA and all your readers are mostly white, you're working really hard to make sure it's mostly white.
Also, part of your effort to expand the meaning of publishing is you created the creation of a publishing company called Read Large Press that I think you started in 2008.
Yeah.
And you have published several poets. I have some names here like Kim Calder, Billy Burgos, and I also think Wendy Ortiz.
Yeah, Read Large Press. So I met my wife, Judith, at NYU when I was doing grad school there. She was there doing grad school also. And she wanted to try living in LA, so we moved back to LA. And there were just so many amazing writers in LA that we knew. So we first started a journal called Wednesday. And it was just publishing writers who were in our Wednesday night writing workshop that we were taking. So we only wanted to publish their works in progress, stuff they wrote during those 8 weeks of workshop.
Okay.
We did that for like a year and a half, and then we stopped it, and it was like, I think we're ready to start a small press. And our goal was just to publish like 1 book a year of someone in LA that we love who couldn't get their books published anywhere. That's how it started. At some point, we realized we are not very interested in just publishing books. I mean, there's like over 2 million books that get published every year in the US, I think. So it's like, then what's our goal? What is it that we want it to be? So we started thinking about publishing books as an excuse to bring people together, publicly engage with each other, with the artists. And so our focus has been on events a lot more.
You write poetry, but you have also writing about poetry and writing about social issues.
Yeah.
You used to have a column in Cultural Weekly. You also have published in Socolo Public Square and in other magazines. And this is another broad question, but what do you think is the role of poetry in society or in our communities?
I used to have a very different view of art.
Okay.
Art as this uplifting, beautiful thing.
That was your old view?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's changed. Not that I don't think it's that, but it's that and also all the other things that anything else in this world is. Okay. People use poetry as a means to give voice and to contribute something to the world. They also use poetry to erase people, attack people. Attacking people of color with their work, as with the excuse of this is art. And publications too, when their entire editorial staff is white, straight men, or who occasionally publish like people of color for their benefit, then it's like you're not helping, you're not contributing anything. the world can go on without these poems. The world can't go on if you keep behaving this way.
What would you like to see in the poetry world of Los Angeles?
That's a really hard question because there was something about LA that's been so beautiful, which is because it's such a sprawl, nobody's had to rely on anybody else. It's like, if you're not gonna bring me to your event, I'll create my own over here. But that's changing just because of like real estate price, just because of like, I think like writers and publishers moving into LA from other cities that do things differently, and also the rise of like MFA programs where it becomes more of a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that helps at all. I wish, just like everything else, more resources went to people who represent the city in a more accurate way. Like, money-wise and all that, when you look at like arts grants, for example, in the city, like it seems like half of it goes to the music center. Like, really, do we need all that money to go to the music center? Things like that.
Let's have one more poem.
So The Yellow House is a book-length poem. So this is just the segment. I chased the crows until I was standing alone on train tracks. How dark it was that night. But I kept believing as I shivered in my well-worn t-shirt that I would one day catch their cries.
In your work, there's a lot of references to social conflict, immigration.
Yeah.
One of the book's Abductions, I connect the title with the fact that you left Korea when you were very young, and also it felt like you were abducted from that place, and then when you went to South America, and the same thing after a few years. In Paraguay, you were again abducted to come to Los Angeles.
The reason I created the alien abduction mythology was so I could speak about the miscarriage my wife and I had. But as I started writing, I realized the life of immigration was also about alien abduction. When I was like 3 or 4, my dad used to read to me from his favorite little book that he had, and it was a book of all these unexplained mystical things from around the world, right? So I'm like 3 or 4, he's like telling me about the pyramids, about the Bermuda Triangle, and the Stonehenge, and all these things. And my dad's also a retired pastor. They, when I was very young, taught me how to accept that there was another world happening at the same time as this physical one that you see and experience. So like, I've lived in all these haunted houses my life, but it's never like a shock to me. It was like one of those things you just accept as, oh, of course there's another thing happening. So reading that section about the crows and everything, it just became a thing of like how my parents always taught me to look at things beyond, that a bird flying by, it's more than just a bird flying by. Yeah.
Let's listen to a poem where you talk about your father, also from The Yellow House.
The language you began to utter in the womb to one day let you love and fear God, hidden in the falling of a petal like your future, not burning toward its end. This is the language you lose to speak words that you are never supposed to know, words that will go on to scar your tongue because your father believed in penance and he wanted you to be saved. What I started really thinking about with my parents is that they've always told me all their stories. I think it was their way of saying, we know you're going to be a writer, here are our stories. But I always wondered whether my job was to carry that with me or wipe it out. When you inherit trauma, isn't your job to wipe it out instead of carrying it and passing it along? So that's a thing that I've been thinking a lot about. If it's trauma, we don't want it to continue. But if there's pride around it and it's part of our identity, what are we supposed to do? Like, is it fair to pass it on? Here, trauma, take it. So it's been complicated thinking about it that way. So the book I've been working on is called My Name is Wolf. It's also a single poem, but it's much more connected narrative than The Yellow House. My Name is Wolf is about the narrator going into the forest during winter to die. But when he is there, he's met by a voice that teaches him the names of all the important things that have been in his life, including his own name. And it's like, and he still dies, but just the knowing of the name and the uttering of the name makes those things immortal and permanent. I think a lot about wolves. I bet those wolves know they are going to be extinct one day. There's no way around it. We're gonna kill them off. But they're not gonna change. They're gonna remain what they are until the end comes, even if they know the end is coming. But that's something that I was really thinking about. And just the strength of knowing that that's my name. To be able to say this is my name and that thing is something I can't change or take away. I'm writing the whole thing on Facebook and then find the proper sequencing of it and all that.
Let's close with one last piece from The Yellow House.
Daughter, sister, all the dogs, soon my mother, father too, brother one day, and wife. Here I am, the end. And I need to find a way to rejoice because I am the house. I am the house, amen. I am the house, amen. I am the yellow house, amen. I am the house haunted. And faith looks like letting go of their ghosts that will never leave your body. I am the yellow house of ghosts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.